Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 9th of January. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather and trusting us with your weather information for your planning purposes. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information no matter what part of Alaska you're in. 1-800-472-0391 will serve your weather information needs on the phone. You can always find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. And of course, if you can't find what you need, feel free to email me anytime at david.snider@noaa.gov. I'll be happy to help you as best as I can. Let's take a look at the weather situation in your part of Alaska. Starting in southeast tonight, coastal areas up toward Pelican and areas out around Sitka are looking at a quick burst of snow, about 2 to 6 inches of snow with this band of moisture coming in and with a weak front hovering very close to your region. It's expected to come in and end pretty much tonight and into the early overnight hours before it settles down. And Sitka and Pelican are probably the most likely places, but Gustavus, you're probably right there on the fringe too and may pick up some of that snow, but Sitka and Pelican probably get the most. A look up further north toward White Pass and the Klondike Highway shows that you are under a wind chill advisory. If you're heading that way, make sure you bring some extra layers, even if you're not wearing them in the car. The winds outside and the cold that's already there combined could create a feels-like index of something closer to about 30 to 40 below. That'll go through 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So plan on some really cold weather, especially around the White Pass area. So it's snow down below and cold and wind up top. And a look up toward the Alaska Range and the Deltana and Tanana Flats region out toward Denali and anywhere really north of the Alaska Range passes that we've got shaded in yellow here. Those are wind chill advisories as well as a wind advisory for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, especially Delta Junction there. So we already know the wind's moving around, and we certainly know it's pretty cold there. When you put the wind and the cold together, we're talking about wind chills that could be as cold as 45 below through tonight and into tomorrow. On top of that, we know the winds are going to be a little bit stronger around the Delta Junction area. With that, we expect gusts out of the east up to about 55 miles per hour at times. So plan on the wind moving things around on there, and if you have to get out of your car for any emergency, make sure, again, you've got some extra layers, and if you have to be out, make sure you're covered up and don't have that exposed skin. 30 minutes is all it takes to get some serious frostbite in that kind of weather, as you well know. And up north, around the Brooks Range, a winter weather advisory is in effect until midnight tonight, so this one won't last a whole lot longer either. However, the winds gusting up to 45 miles per hour could reduce visibility down to about a half mile or so because it's blowing snow around. So areas north of the Brooks Range passes there, north and east, expecting to see a winter weather advisory, at least through midnight tonight, for visibilities that are down below about a half mile. Here's the big picture. The satellite picture this afternoon shows a pretty decent low out here across the southern Bering and North Pacific. This is bringing in several surges of moisture, but one thing that's going to change in the next several days is that southerly flow is going to start to become more predominant, especially as we get toward the end of the week. In the meantime, we still have a serious amount of cold air up here across the central and western interior, and that stable flow is pushing that cold northerly wind further and further south. But eventually, this is going to creep a little bit more eastward, and the southerly flow is going to creep up a little bit more from the south. So watch for more of these bands of moisture to move in. One of those, like we were talking about, is approaching the outer coast of southeastern Alaska. This band right here is what we expect to bring in a solid 2 to 6 inches of snow for places like Pelican and Sitka especially. But like I was saying, it could get into places around Gustavus and maybe a little bit further into Cross Sound. So keep your eye on that, and don't be surprised if you have to shovel or blow some of that snow out of the way in the next night or two. Here's a look at the weather map, and really cold, high pressure here at the surface, of course. We're talking about nighttime temperatures that are about 30 to 40 below, maybe even 50 below in some cases there around Northway. And you can see up north, not a whole lot of moisture there. A little bit of light snow might be falling around Wainwright. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes if it's just some crystals, diamond dust kind of falling there on the sensor from time to time. But out west, 965 millibar low, that's not really the big guy. The big guy is even further out to the west and south. Down south, though, you can see one of those southerly waves already shaping up there at 994 millibars. That's going to hover here across the Gulf tonight, and along this boundary here across the north and eastern Gulf, that's where we expect to see some of that heavier bursts of precipitation as that's leaning right there along the outer coast. Southern areas, Ketchikan, Annette, you're probably going to see a little bit, but the heavier stuff should be lingering along the outer coast. High pressure is really in charge of the interior. A cold and clear night should be expected. There's going to be some blowing snow there like we saw with those winter weather advisories and the wind gusts there around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, especially around Delta Junction, will be some of the strongest winds we have in the region. Out across the west, periods of rain and snow will mix across the central and western chain. A 962 millibar low in the west will kind of grab a hold of this entire system and just kind of start drifting that eastward. So watch for that movement in the next map. Low pressure lingers across the eastern Gulf. Dry weather to the north. Kind of leftover clouds moving across southwest, and some rain and snow showers for the southwestern Cape, some wind moving snow off of the Seward Peninsula and the YK Delta. But one thing you'll notice here when we look at our marine maps is there's a lot of open waters still here, so that's going to reduce the amount of snow that can be blowing westward and reducing visibility that way. The issue you'll be dealing with is heavy freezing spray because of that. As we get into Thursday, low pressure is kind of reorganizing itself a little bit more across the central chain. It's down to about 964 millibars at its strongest point, 972 south of the chain. And here's our occluded front that's really focusing some of those stronger south and easterly winds across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula and into Bristol Bay. The front that was producing the heavier snow, well, it's lost a little bit of that moisture source here. And now it's going to focus a little more moisture right here outside of Prince William Sound at Kodiak Island. And that brings in a better chance of snow for areas west of the Cook Inlet region and into the western Alaska Range, and maybe into places like McGrath and Lake Iliamna as we get into Thursday. And around the Chugach Range and Prince William Sound, periods of rain and snow should be expected there. So things start to change a little bit more as we get toward Thursday and Friday. And remember, you can already see that southerly flow shaping up across the Gulf. That's going to reorient the weather pattern across a large part of the state as the deep cold drains out toward the rest of the lower 48 states. Here's a look at temperatures as we get into Wednesday morning. Remember I said it was cold around Northway? Minus 43 is what we have for an exact number there, but you can do the math there. Anywhere from about 45 to 50 below, certainly in the range. Teens and 20s for southeast, cold there as well. Fort Yukon down to 35 below, 42 below for Arctic Village, and anywhere from 10 to 20 below for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound 5 to 10 below. Norton Sound looking at 5 to 10 below. Southwest in the Capes anywhere from single digits to about 20 above. 33 in Kodiak, South Central, single digit territory, closer to 0 for many tonight. 30s to about 40 degrees for southwest, the Pribilofs, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Dutch Harbor, Nunn, Alaska, closer to 40 for the daytime high tomorrow. 15 below in Fairbanks, though. 35 below in Northway, South Central. Single digits and teens, maybe some 20s across coastal areas like Seward and Homer, 38 in Kodiak. Teens and 20s for southeast tomorrow afternoon. The North Slope anywhere from 5 to 10 below and 17 in Nome. Low temperatures once again Thursday morning, brutal for Northway, 45 below or so, 23 below in Fairbanks, 36 below in Fort Yukon. Not a whole lot better there in Tanana. Looks like Ambler about 10 below. Kotzebue, you're looking at temps about 5 below. Bristol Bay back in the 20s and 30s, and highs on Thursday warming up a little bit in South Central, teens, 20s, and 30s for many across the Gulf Coast communities.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions are expected from St. Lawrence Island out toward St. Matthew and Nunivak Island, from the Pribilofs all the way down toward Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and just about to the Alaska Peninsula. You'll find some areas of VFR, but you'll have to get through MVFR across the southwest coast, the peninsula, and most of the chain. Look for MVFR to spread eastward into southeast with the exceptions of Lynn Canal northward toward Chilkoot and White Pass, and that should linger through the afternoon. So smooth sailing, at least, well, visibility-wise anyway, across most of the interior, the northern parts of southeast, but you'll also see improvement here across Stevens Passage southward toward the Dixon entrance on the inside. The coastal areas on the outside still looking like MVFR. Watch for IFR across the eastern sections of the Kenai Peninsula, all the way across the eastern areas of Kodiak Island, on the western side of Shelikof Strait and along the Aleutian Range, and then hit and miss across the Bering Sea, especially from Adak westward toward Kiska. By Thursday, really not much of a change in the situation. MVFR, or IFR, let me try that one more time. VFR for southeast with MVFR across the outer coast there. So most of the panhandle looking pretty good. South Central and Southwest still looking okay and mainly clear across the North Slope. Look for IFR across St. Lawrence Island and out across the western sections of the Bering. You start to see that shift one more time where MVFR swings back into southeast and IFR increasing across the western Alaska Range, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range, and MVFR, at least for most of the Aleutians, with IFR as you head up towards St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew. Many areas across southwest will see hit and miss MVFR, with still looking at VFR, most of the interior and north slope. Here's your pass conditions now for your Wednesday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions prevail. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expecting to slowly lean over from south to north toward MVFR as your day goes on tomorrow. Rainy Pass and Windy Pass both look pretty good. As you get over to Isabel Pass and also Mentasta Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions holding there. Tenita Pass also looking for VFR for your Wednesday. And Portage Pass will gradually push over to MVFR from the Prince William Sound side, of course. And Chilkoot and White Pass looking pretty good for your Wednesday. VFR conditions should hold. Now, as we get into the freezing level tomorrow, notice the surface freezing line is still kind of hovering well south of the ice edge across, just south of St. Matthew and south of Nunivak Island and over Bristol Bay, and then takes a jog over toward the Kenai Peninsula and then down through the Dixon Entrance. The elevated warm air aloft is well to the south, so from Vancouver Island and then all the way out toward the central and eastern chain there to about 2,000 feet. There's no really big surge of warm air hovering over Alaska right now. So what does that do for our icing potential? It's somewhat limited to at least above 3,000 to 4,000 feet. The moisture content is really focused on the western and central Bering Sea, southwestern Alaska, and the Gulf of Alaska. Most of the central and northern and western interior really not having a big surge of moisture over us right now. If you could look at the water vapor imagery, one tool we use to assess how much moisture is over the region, you'd see a big dry patch right over us right now in the upper atmosphere. So that's good news. Most of your icing risk should be generally limited to isolated moderate above about 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Now onto the jet stream. Here's another interesting pattern. A really strong push from the Pacific jet. That's not too unusual this season, but you get that bump here across the Pacific Northwest that is guiding in a little more active weather to the southern sections of southeast. Aloft, high pressure is anchored just off the Chukchi coast. This is keeping that cold flow coming straight down from the north. That's the reason why many locations are a lot colder than we were several weeks ago. There is a sign, though, that this jet stream will start to work its way back in from the south, and that means more of an overall southerly flow for more parts of Alaska. One exception would be southeast, still under that ridge of high pressure, so you might still get a taste of the cold in southeast, but more places than not as we head into the weekend will start to warm up. Here's that southerly flow already evident here across the eastern Gulf. 9,000 foot winds anywhere from 15 to 30 knots. Light winds across the interior around weak low pressure, and a broad southeasterly flow across most of the Bering Sea, 35 to 50 knots there. A similar pattern at 3,000 feet. Light winds across the eastern Gulf at 15 to 20, including over southeast. Over the interior, a little faster flow across the north slope, 20 to 30 knots there, generally from east to west, southeast over the Bristol Bay region. Stronger at 45 knots there, and up to 50 knots across the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And that's where we find a better chance for considerable moderate turbulence, generally below 4,000 feet from the central chain all the way through Nikolsky, Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, out toward Kodiak Island, Homer, and just about up to Nikolsky, and out across, or Nikiski, I should say, then out west to Cape Newenham and most of Bristol Bay, looking at some at least increased areas of chop. Same goes for Eagle up to Northway and probably west to about Fairbanks and across the Chukchi coast. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stick around.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the Hazardous Weather Testbed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a look at your latest sea ice edge analysis, and if you're paying attention in Shishmaref or Wales, Tin City, and north of Gamble, there is a significant amount of open water in the area, and a lot of what you see here in the blue shades is marginal ice, but even that is significantly lower than in what it appears like in our image, because we're showing you concentrations less than 80%. There's a lot of open water still in the Chukchi, through the Bering Strait, and in the northern Bering itself. Now, there is some coastal areas of thicker ice around the Yukon Delta, into Etolan Strait, and into the Kuskokwim Delta, but that's about where it stops. And with warmer weather on the way, a lot of this will continue to change. The very latest analysis and outlook anytime you want at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at Wednesday's forecast. We are talking about storm warnings this evening across the Lynn Canal, gales otherwise as we head into tomorrow for just about all locations in southeast. You're looking at winds anywhere from 20 to 40 knots on the inside, gusts up to 55 knots around Stevens Passage. All of this blowing in from the north end along that tight pressure gradient. There is a frontal boundary, remember, lingering very close to the coast. That's what's focusing some heavier amounts of snow across the outer coast tonight for Pelican and Sitka. Offshore winds will develop tomorrow. The snow should start to taper off pretty quickly this evening. There will be some areas of stronger gusts in the northern Gulf, and by Thursday you can see there will be stronger gusts in the inside passages, 50-knot winds there. Otherwise, sustained winds 25 to 35 with offshore flow from 20 to 30 knots. As you look in south central, northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound with 3-foot seas, looking at 5 to 12-foot seas around Cook Inlet, the highest of which, of course, west of the Barren Islands. Otherwise, the east and northeasterly flow across the northern Gulf. On Thursday, winds come up a little bit more, so do the seas, up to 13 feet outside of Resurrection Bay and Seward. 13-foot seas outside of Prince William Sound, northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound itself. North and northeasterlies down toward Cook Inlet with 35 to 40 knots there, 12 to 14-foot seas expected again around the Barrens. On Wednesday in Bristol Bay, you're looking at easterlies at 30 knots with a 6-foot sea, 8-foot seas down the coast, 25 to 30 knots for the Pacific coastline, northeasterlies inside of Shelikof Strait on that 30-knot wind. As we get into Thursday, you'll notice the seas coming up across the southern Bering and across the North Pacific. Remember, a front lies just to the west, and we're starting to see that return of the stronger southerly winds. Winds will be coming up for Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. Right now, we're showing winds around 30 to 35 knots and seas up to about 12 to 15 feet, 7 to 11 feet across the Bering Sea and through Bristol Bay with that 30-knot wind for you. Across the Aleutian chain, you'll notice a big difference from east to west. Across the central and eastern chain, anywhere from 20 to 40 knots from the south and southeast. Kind of a light and variable wind here as the winds switch around across the central chain with winds only at 15 knots, and then a northeasterly flow on the back side of the weather system, 15 to 20 knots with a 9 to 12-foot sea. As we get into Thursday, things are trying to kind of reorient themselves, but we get back into kind of that north and northwesterly flow wrapping around low pressure that's gradually moving its way into the Gulf. So we get 25 to 35 knot winds and seas that are higher in the west, 22 to 23-foot seas. They're 22 south of Adak and Atka as well, and anywhere from 12 to 17 17-foot seas north of Adak and Atka and all the way south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. So the strongest winds will be shifting east, but the higher seas will be following that out across the west. As we get into Wednesday across the YK Delta and the Bering Sea, 25 to 40 knot winds, easterlies blowing into St. Paul and St. George up to 40 knots with 15-foot seas there. We're watching for heavy freezing spray in the north as well. Northeasterlies over the ice in Norton Sound at 20 knots. That's up to 25 on Thursday. And then more of a northeasterly push coming off the coastline as we get into Thursday. Winds stay up for St. Paul and St. George, 35 knots and gales, 14-foot seas there. And northeasterlies around St. Matthew with a 15-foot sea expected on Thursday. Now, over most areas there in the ice across the Beaufort Sea, 10-knot winds, northeasterlies across the Chukchi Sea, 15 to 20 there. But remember, there's a lot of open water stretching in here north of the Bering Strait. As we get into Thursday, not a big change. Still looking at generally light winds across the Beaufort Sea, but east and northeasterlies begin to come up across the Chukchi Sea, anywhere from 10 to about 25 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound. So watch for some changes there. 25 knots north of St. Lawrence Island. Let's recap your weather for tonight. A winter weather advisory is posted along the outer coast of southeast, just kind of gradually including Gustavus there, but Pelican and Sitka will be the primary targets for about 2 to 6 inches of snow. A lot of that's going to wrap up this evening and by early tomorrow morning, but plan on some snow in that region. And don't be surprised to see snow showers further south along the frontal boundary. Now for the White Pass region, wind chill advisories are in effect. You could be talking about a wind chill as cold as about 40 to below there. That'll last through 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Fog on the north and wind across the Alaska range with winter weather advisories and poor visibility for the northeastern Brooks Range. We'll talk to you again right here tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.